A $10 million jet engine screams like it's tearing itself apart. Executives freeze. Engineers panic. The CEO's career hangs by a thread as federal inspectors walk through the door. And the only person in the room who knows what's really happening? The janitor they all ignore. What comes next will expose a lie so deep it could destroy everything, or save it. This is a story about buried truth, second chances, and one father's fight to protect what matters most. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The fluorescent lights in Hangar 7 buzzed with that particular frequency that made your teeth ache if you listened too long. Adrian Cole didn't listen. He'd learned years ago to tune out the things that didn't matter, to keep his head down, to make himself small in a world that had already decided he wasn't worth noticing. He pushed the industrial mop across the polished concrete floor, the wheels squeaking in rhythm with his movements. Tuesday morning, 6:47 a.m. The engineers wouldn't arrive for another hour, which meant he had the place to himself, just him and the machines that cost more than he'd earn in 10 lifetimes. The GE9X engine sat in the center of the hangar like a sleeping giant, its massive turbine blades catching the overhead lights. Adrian had watched them install it 3 days ago, a ballet of precision and paranoia. Millions of dollars of aerospace technology, and they'd trusted him to mop around it. The irony wasn't lost on him. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out with wet hands, already knowing what it would say. "Daddy, did you remember my lunch money?" Maya. 8 years old, gap-toothed, and the only thing in his life that made sense anymore. "In your backpack, sweetheart. Purple zipper pocket." "Found it. Love you." He smiled despite himself, tucked the phone away, and went back to work. The mop handle was smooth under his calloused palms, different from the tools he used to hold, the precision instruments that required steady hands and steadier nerves. Those days were gone. That life was gone. And he'd made peace with it mostly. The hangar door opened with a metallic groan. Adrian looked up, surprised. It was barely 7. The cleaning crew didn't overlap with the day shift. That was the whole point. Keep the help invisible, keep the machinery pristine, keep everyone in their designated boxes. But this wasn't an engineer. Evelyn Hart walked like she owned the building, because technically she did. 30 years old and already CEO of Apex Aeronautics, the kind of woman who wore her ambition like armor. Dark suit, darker hair pulled back tight enough to give normal people a headache. She moved with purpose, always had somewhere more important to be. Adrian had seen her before, of course. You couldn't work here and not know who she was. But they'd never spoken. Why would they? He was furniture to people like her. Useful, necessary, completely forgettable. She wasn't alone. Behind her came a parade of nervous energy. 3 executives in matching anxiety, tablets clutched like shields. Adrian recognized the type. Mid-level managers who'd climbed high enough to panic about falling. Completely routine, one of them was saying, a thin man with glasses that kept sliding down his nose. "The FAA does these spot inspections all the time. We've passed 12 in a row. 13 is supposed to be unlucky, Marcus." Evelyn's voice was sharp, controlled. "I'd prefer not to test that theory today." "The engine diagnostics came back clean yesterday," another executive chimed in, a woman with red hair and a tremor in her hands that betrayed her calm tone. "Every system check passed. We're golden." Evelyn stopped walking. The others nearly crashed into her. "Golden," she repeated, tasting the word like it might be poisonous. "Jennifer, we're about to let a federal inspector crawl through our flagship propulsion system while our competitors are circling like sharks. Golden is not the word I want to hear. I want perfect. I want flawless. I want so clean it makes their teeth hurt." Adrian kept mopping, but he'd slowed down. Something was off. "You didn't bring the CEO and her inner circle to the hangar at 7 in the morning for a routine inspection. And you definitely didn't bring that kind of tension with you unless something was wrong." "The inspector arrives at 9, the third executive said, checking his watch like it might have betrayed him. "We have 2 hours to do final checks, review documentation, and—" The engine screamed. Not a normal sound. Not the whine of turbines spinning up or the controlled roar of ignition testing. This was wrong on a primal level, a shriek of metal against metal, of something fundamental coming apart. Everyone froze. The sound lasted maybe 3 seconds, but it felt like longer, like the building itself was holding its breath, waiting to see if it would happen again. Silence crashed back down. "What?" Evelyn said slowly. "Was that?" Nobody answered. The executives looked at each other, then at their tablets, then back at each other. Adrian watched their faces cycle through confusion, denial, and the beginning of real fear. Marcus was the first to move, practically running toward the diagnostic station set up next to the engine. His fingers flew across the keyboard, bringing up readout after readout. "That's impossible," he muttered. "What's impossible?" Evelyn was right behind him, leaning over his shoulder. "Talk to me, Marcus." The engine wasn't even active. It's been in standby mode since yesterday. There's no reason for it to make any sound at all, let alone... He pulled up another screen. "This doesn't make sense." Jennifer had her phone out, already dialing. "I'm calling the engineering team, getting everyone in here now." "Wait." Evelyn held up a hand. "What do the diagnostics say?" Marcus scrolled through data that meant nothing to Adrian from where he stood. "According to this, everything is normal. Temperature, pressure, all readings within standard parameters. But we all heard..." The engine screamed again. This time it was longer, louder. A sustained shriek that made Adrian's fillings ache and his skin crawl. He'd heard sounds like that before, years ago. In a different hangar with different people who'd actually listened to him. He knew exactly what it meant. "Shut it down!" Evelyn was yelling over the noise. "Shut everything down!" "It's not on!" Marcus shouted back. "The system says it's not even running!" The shriek cut off abruptly, leaving a ringing silence that somehow felt worse. Adrian set down his mop. He shouldn't. He knew he shouldn't. That part of his life was over, buried under years of silence and survival. Getting involved meant getting noticed, and getting noticed meant questions he couldn't afford to answer. But he'd heard that sound before, and he knew what happened if you ignored it. "It's thermal expansion," he said. 5 heads turned toward him like he'd materialized out of thin air. Evelyn's eyes found him for the first time. Really found him, not just seeing the uniform and the mop bucket, but actually looking at the person underneath. "Excuse me?" Her voice could have frozen helium. Adrian felt his pulse kick up. 32 years old, and his hand still wanted to shake when people looked at him like that. Like he was overstepping, like he'd forgotten his place. "The sound," he said, keeping his voice level. "It's metal expanding under heat stress. Something inside is getting hot when it shouldn't be." Marcus laughed, sharp and dismissive. "The temperature readings are normal. You just heard me say that." "The readings you're getting are normal," Adrian corrected, "but something's not being measured." "And you would know this how?" Jennifer's tone was ice-wrapped in courtesy. "Are you an engineer?" The question hung in the air like a trap. "No," Adrian said. "I'm just the guy who cleans up here." He picked up his mop again, fighting the urge to disappear into the back rooms where he belonged. But Evelyn was still staring at him, and he could see the calculations happening behind her eyes. She was the kind of person who missed nothing, forgot nothing, and that made her dangerous. "What's your name?" she asked. "Adrian Cole." "How long have you worked here, Mr. Cole?" 3 years. "And in those 3 years you've developed expertise in jet engine acoustics?" There it was. The polite way of calling him an idiot. He should have kept his mouth shut. "No, ma'am," he said. "I just know what things sound like when they're about to fail." The third executive, Adrian didn't know his name, snorted. "This is ridiculous. We're standing here taking engineering advice from the janitorial staff?" "Robert," Evelyn said quietly, not taking her eyes off Adrian. "Shut up." Robert's mouth clicked shut. The engine shrieked again, and this time the sound brought a smell with it. Hot metal and burning insulation, faint but unmistakable. "Everyone out," Evelyn ordered. "Clear the hangar, now." "But the inspection," Marcus started, "is going to find a broken engine if we don't figure out what's happening." She pulled out her phone. "I'm calling the fire department and postponing the FAA visit. Jennifer, get every engineer we have on site immediately. Robert, document everything, every sound, every reading, timestamp it all. And somebody get our insurance liaison on the phone because this is going to get expensive. The executives scattered like startled birds, already talking over each other on their phones. Evelyn looked at Adrian again. "You," she said. "Don't go anywhere." Then she turned and walked toward the engine, close enough to touch it, tilting her head like she was listening for something only she could hear. Adrian wanted to leave. Every instinct told him to grab his mop bucket and disappear before this got worse. But he couldn't make his feet move. The engine sat quiet now, ticking softly as metal cooled. It sounded almost peaceful if you didn't know what to listen for. If you didn't know that peace was sometimes just the pause before everything came apart. By 7:30, the hangar had transformed into controlled chaos. Engineers flooded through the doors in clusters, summoned from breakfast tables and morning showers, and probably a few beds they shouldn't have been in. They gathered around the diagnostic station like priests around an altar, pointing at screens and arguing in acronyms that Adrian had once spoken fluently. He stood in the corner, still holding his mop, watching. Nobody had told him he could leave. Nobody had told him anything. He'd just sort of been absorbed into the background radiation of the crisis, present but invisible. The fire department had sent an inspector, a thick-necked man in turnout gear who kept touching the engine housing and shaking his head. "It's not hot," he reported to Evelyn. "Surface temperature is 68 degrees. Whatever's happening, it's not external." "Internal thermal event," one of the engineers suggested. A young guy couldn't be more than 25 with the kind of confidence that came from never being wrong yet. "Maybe a bearing seized up." "Bearings don't seize on a cold engine," another engineer countered. Older, graying, the kind of tired that came from too many late nights fixing other people's mistakes. "And they definitely don't seize 3 times in 20 minutes on a system that's supposedly in standby mode." "So we agree something impossible is happening," the young engineer said. "I don't believe in impossible," Evelyn cut in. She'd been on her phone for the past 15 minutes, pacing like a caged animal. "I believe in things we haven't figured out yet. Keep looking." Adrian watched them cycle through the same diagnostics Marcus had already run. Same results. Everything normal. Everything wrong. His daughter's school started in 45 minutes. He'd need to leave soon if he wanted to be there for drop-off, and Maya liked it when he walked her to the door. Said it made her feel important, having her dad there when most kids just got shoved out of cars in the circle. But he couldn't shake the feeling that leaving right now would be a mistake. The engine shrieked. Everyone jumped. Adrian noticed that the interval between sounds was getting shorter. 4 minutes this time, maybe less. "There has to be a pattern," the older engineer was saying. "Thermal cycling, pressure changes, something." "Run the spectral analysis," someone else suggested. "Already did. Nothing anomalous." "Check the fuel lines." "Fuel system isn't active." "Then what the hell is—" "Stop." Evelyn's voice cut through the chatter like a knife. "Everyone stop talking for 30 seconds and let me think." Silence fell. 23 people holding their breath, waiting for their CEO to pull a solution out of thin air. Adrian knew she couldn't, because she was looking at the wrong problem. They all were. He set down his mop. "Ma'am," he said, and hated how his voice wanted to crack. "Can I ask a question?" Evelyn turned, and for a second he saw genuine surprise on her face, like she'd forgotten he existed. "Go ahead," she said. "When did you install the engine?" "Friday, 3 days ago. Why?" "And when did you last run a full power diagnostic?" The older engineer answered before Evelyn could. "Saturday morning, 16 hours after installation. Standard protocol. Engine performed perfectly. 98% efficiency across all metrics." Adrian nodded slowly. "What about Sunday?" "We don't run diagnostics on Sunday unless there's a problem." "So between Saturday morning and now, the engine's been sitting cold." "In standby mode? Yes." The engineer was looking at him with a mix of confusion and irritation. "What's your point?" "The sound started this morning, right when the temperature changed." "Temperature hasn't changed," Marcus interjected from the diagnostic station. "It's been a steady 68 degrees in here all week. Climate control." "Outside temperature," Adrian said. "It was 59 degrees when I got here at 6. It's 72 now. Houston mornings warm up fast." "So what?" the young engineer scoffed. You think the engine's allergic to sunshine? I think something's reacting to thermal expansion, Adrian said. Something that only moves when the differential changes. That's why your diagnostics don't show it. You're measuring the wrong thing at the wrong time. That's, the young engineer started. Actually not insane, the older engineer interrupted. He was staring at Adrian with new eyes, the kind that saw past the uniform. If there's a component that's temperature sensitive and it was installed incorrectly, it could create exactly this kind of intermittent failure. But we'd see it in the installation report, Marcus said. Would we? The older engineer turned to Evelyn. When's the last time you actually read one of those reports cover to cover? Evelyn's jaw tightened. Pull it up, now. Marcus typed, pulled up a document, started scrolling. Here, installation completed by certified team, all components installed to manufacturer specifications, sign off by... He stopped. By who? Evelyn leaned in. By Scott Hendricks. The name dropped into the conversation like a stone into still water. That's impossible, Jennifer said quietly. Scott left the company 6 months ago. Then why is his digital signature on a report dated 3 days ago? Nobody had an answer for that. The engine shrieked again, longer this time, and something in the sound had changed. It wasn't just metal anymore. There was an undertone of grinding, of parts that shouldn't be touching starting to wear against each other. We're running out of time, the older engineer said. Whatever's happening in there, it's getting worse. Evelyn pulled out her phone, made a call. Security, this is Hart. I need you to pull all access logs for Hangar 7 from Friday to today. I want to know everyone who's been in here, when, and for how long. She listened. I don't care if it takes all day. Start now. She hung up and turned to face her team. Here's what we know, she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. We have an engine that's failing in a way that shouldn't be possible. We have a false installation report signed by someone who doesn't work here anymore. And we have a federal inspector arriving in... She checked her watch. 90 minutes, unless I can stall them longer. Cancel the inspection, Robert suggested. Tell them we need to reschedule. And explain what? That our $10 million flagship engine is possessed? That we can't figure out what's wrong with our own equipment? Evelyn shook her head. The FAA doesn't do postponements unless you have a damn good reason. And our janitor thinks it might be a thermal expansion issue isn't going to cut it. Adrian felt heat rise in his face. She wasn't wrong, but the dismissal stung anyway. What if he's right? The older engineer asked. Everyone looked at him. I'm serious, he continued. What if there actually is an installation problem, something we missed? Then we open it up and look, the young engineer said. That's a 4-hour job minimum, Marcus countered. We don't have 4 hours. So we fail the inspection. We fail the inspection, we lose certification, Jennifer said. We lose certification, we lose contracts, we lose contracts, we lose the company. The weight of that settled over the room like a fog. Adrian looked at his watch. 7:51. Maya's school started at 8:30. He was going to be late. He pulled out his phone, sent a quick text. Hey kiddo, I might not make it for drop-off today. Work thing. Love you. The response came back in seconds. It's okay, Daddy. Is everything okay? Everything's fine. Just busy. Have a good day. He pocketed the phone and looked up to find Evelyn watching him. Problem? She asked. No, ma'am. You have somewhere to be. It wasn't a question. My daughter, he admitted. But it can wait. Something flickered across Evelyn's face, too quick to read. How old? 8. She nodded once, then turned back to her team. All right, we're going to do this the smart way. Half of you start prepping to open the engine housing. The other half keeps running diagnostics. I want every angle covered, and somebody get me a structural engineer who can tell me if thermal expansion could actually cause this kind of failure pattern. I can tell you that, Adrian said. The words were out before he could stop them. Every eye in the hangar turned to him again, but this time the looks were different, skeptical, curious, and from Evelyn, calculating. You can, she said flatly. Yes, ma'am. Because you're a janitor with a side degree in aerospace engineering. No, ma'am, because I used to design these systems. The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus broke it first. You're telling me you're an engineer? Was, Adrian corrected, past tense. Then what the hell are you doing pushing a mop? The young engineer demanded. Making a living. That's not an answer, Evelyn said, and her voice had gone very quiet, dangerous quiet. Who did you work for? Adrian met her eyes, knew he was about to step off a cliff he couldn't climb back up. Here, he said. I worked here 7 years ago, before you bought the company. The bomb dropped. Jennifer pulled out her tablet, fingers flying. Cole. Adrian Cole. She looked up. You're in the system. Former senior engineer, propulsion division. Terminated in 2019. Not terminated, Adrian said. I resigned. The file says terminated. The file's wrong. A lot of that going around today, the older engineer muttered. Evelyn held up a hand for silence. She walked toward Adrian slowly, deliberately, until she was standing close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her brown eyes. Explain, she said. Adrian took a breath. 7 years ago, I filed a safety report about a design flaw in the connector harness system for GE9X engines. Specifically, about how non-specification parts could create thermal expansion issues that wouldn't show up in standard diagnostics, but would manifest as intermittent acoustic anomalies, the older engineer finished, his voice hollow. Jesus Christ. I submitted the report to my supervisor, Adrian continued. He buried it, said it would delay production, cost too much to redesign. When I pushed, I got labeled as difficult. When I pushed harder, I got pushed out. Why didn't you take it to the FAA? Marcus asked. Marcus. I tried. Adrian's jaw tightened. I was told that if I went public without evidence, I'd be blacklisted from every aerospace company in the country. And I had a 2-year-old daughter who needed health insurance and food and a roof over her head, so I made a choice. You chose her, Evelyn said softly. Every time. The engine shrieked again, and this time the sound was accompanied by a visible shimmer of heat distortion around the exhaust housing. It's accelerating, the older engineer said, his voice tight. Whatever's happening in there, we're past the point of no return. Open it up, Evelyn ordered. Right now. I don't care what it takes. That's going to void about 17 warranties, Robert warned. Then we void them. Move. The engineering team scattered, pulling tools and lifting equipment from storage. Adrian watched them work, saw them make 3 small mistakes in the first 90 seconds. Nothing dangerous, but inefficient. Old habits died hard. You could help them, Evelyn said beside him. He looked at her. I'm not an engineer anymore. But you could be. That's not how it works. I'm the CEO. I can make it work however I want. She paused. Help them fix this, and we'll talk about what comes next. Adrian thought about Maya, about the text she'd sent, asking if everything was okay, about the parent-teacher conference next week and the field trip permission slip he needed to sign, and the 1,000 small things that made up their life together. I can't afford to lose this job, he said. Then don't think of it as losing. Think of it as upgrading. Just like that. Just like that. Adrian looked at the engine, at the team struggling to position the heavy lifting frame correctly. They had it 3 degrees off angle. In about 2 minutes, someone was going to strip a bolt because of it. He walked over. Stop, he said. The young engineer looked up, annoyed. We've got this. You've got it wrong. The frame's not aligned with the load-bearing points. You're going to crack the housing mount if you keep going. It's fine. It's 3 degrees off horizontal. Look at the stress indicator on the left corner. The young engineer looked. His face went pale. Shit. Shift it counterclockwise, but keep the vertical axis locked. The housing needs to come straight up, not at an angle. They adjusted. The frame clicked into place perfectly. The older engineer walked over, extended his hand. David Chen, I've been here 15 years, and I don't think we've ever met. Adrian shook it. Different departments. Different worlds, apparently. David looked at the engine. You really think this is the connector harness? Only one way to find out. They worked for the next 30 minutes in something approaching harmony. Engineers and a janitor who wasn't really a janitor, all of them trying to stop a disaster that hadn't quite happened yet. The housing came off at 8:43. The interior of the engine was a maze of precision components, each one machined to tolerances measured in microns. Beautiful, in its way. Like watching the inside of a watch, if watches could fly at 600 miles an hour and cost $10 million. David pointed with a flashlight. There, see that? Adrian saw it. The connector harness, a cluster of high-temperature cables designed to route electrical signals through the engine core, was the wrong color. Subtle, almost imperceptible unless you knew what to look for. But the coating was definitely not the specification material. That's not copper alloy sheathing, Adrian said quietly. That's aluminum. Jesus, David breathed. Aluminum expands almost twice as fast as copper under thermal stress, which means every time the ambient temperature changes, the cables shift, they rub against the housing, create friction, heat, noise. And eventually, catastrophic failure. They both turned to look at Evelyn, who'd been standing behind them in silence. Her face was unreadable. So this was installed incorrectly, she said. More than that, Adrian replied. This was installed deliberately. Copper alloy harnesses cost about $3,000. Aluminum ones cost $300. Someone saved $2,700 and signed off using a dead man's credentials. Not a dead man, Marcus called from the diagnostic station. Security just sent over the access logs. Scott Hendricks was in this hangar Friday night from 11 p.m. to 2 a.m., and his badge was used again Sunday at 3 a.m. Scott doesn't work here anymore, Jennifer said. Then someone's using his badge, Evelyn said. Pull the surveillance footage. I want to see who was in here. Robert was already on it. Footage is corrupted both nights. Files show errors when you try to open them. Convenient, David muttered. Evelyn pulled out her phone, made another call. This is Hart. I need you to lock down all exits from the building. Nobody leaves until I say so. And find Scott Hendricks. I don't care if you have to call his mother. I want him found. She hung up. How long to replace the harness? 3 hours if we rush it, David said. Maybe 2 if we're lucky. The inspector gets here in 47 minutes. Then we're not going to make it. Evelyn looked at the engine, at the wrong-colored cables, at the evidence of someone's greed and someone else's negligence. Yes, we are, she said. Adrian, you're going to walk me through exactly what happened 7 years ago. Every detail, every conversation, every piece of documentation you can remember. Jennifer, get legal on the phone. Marcus, I need you to pull every installation report filed in the past year. I want to know if this is a pattern or a one-off. David, you're in charge of the fix. Do whatever it takes. What about the inspection? Robert asked. Evelyn smiled, and it was not a nice smile. I'm going to tell the FAA inspector the truth, she said, that we discovered a critical safety issue and we're fixing it, that we believe there's been deliberate tampering with our equipment, and that we're cooperating fully with what's about to become a federal investigation. That's going to tank our stock price, Robert said weakly. Better than tanking one of our planes. She turned to Adrian. You good with this? Adrian thought about Maya again, about the choice he'd made 7 years ago and the one he was about to make now. Yeah, he said. I'm good. The engine shrieked one more time, a final protest before they disconnected it completely. And in the sudden silence that followed, Adrian could hear something he hadn't heard in years. The sound of things finally being made right. The FAA inspector arrived at 9:31, 19 minutes after the engine housing had been completely removed and spread across half the hangar floor like the world's most expensive puzzle. Adrian watched from near the diagnostic station as Evelyn walked out to meet him. The inspector was a compact man in his 50s with the kind of face that had seen every excuse in the book and believed exactly none of them. His badge read Thomas Reeves, and he carried a briefcase that probably weighed more than he did. Ms. Hart, he said, not offering his hand. I was told there might be a delay. No delay, Evelyn replied, her voice steady. Just a complication. Come with me. She led him straight to the exposed engine. No preamble, no attempt to soften it. Adrian had to admire that. Most people would have tried to spin it, to make it sound less catastrophic than it was. Reeves stopped at the edge of the work area, his eyes scanning the disassembled components. His expression didn't change, but Adrian saw his jaw tighten. "How long has it been like this?" Reeves asked. "We opened it 47 minutes ago." "Why?" "Because it was screaming." Evelyn gestured to David, who'd been documenting every step of the process with a camera. "Show him." David pulled up the footage on his tablet, the audio recordings of the engine's shrieks, time-stamped and crystal clear. Reeves listened to all of it without interrupting. "And your diagnostics showed what?" he asked when it finished. "Nothing," Marcus admitted from behind his screen. "Every system read normal, temperature, pressure, all within parameters. Until we found this." Evelyn nodded to Adrian. Adrian stepped forward, feeling the weight of Reeves' tension settle on him like a physical thing. He pointed to the exposed connector harness, still installed in the engine core. "The sheathing material is wrong," he explained. "It's aluminum instead of copper alloy. Aluminum has a higher thermal expansion coefficient. As the ambient temperature increased this morning, the cables expanded, created friction against the housing, generated heat and noise." Reeves leaned in, pulled out a small flashlight, examined the cables himself. "Who certified this installation?" "That's where it gets interesting," Evelyn said. She pulled out her phone, showed him the installation report. "Digital signature belongs to Scott Hendricks, former employee, except he hasn't worked here in 6 months. And the actual installer? Unknown. We're reviewing security footage, but files from the relevant dates are corrupted." Reeves straightened up, and for the first time Adrian saw something like concern cross his face. "You're telling me someone deliberately installed substandard components and falsified the documentation?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you." "Do you have any idea how serious this is?" "I've got a pretty good idea, yeah." Reeves pulled out his phone. "I need to make some calls. Nobody touches that engine until I get federal investigators down here." He looked at Evelyn. "And I mean nobody. This is now a criminal scene." "Understood." He walked away, already talking into his phone in the clipped tones of someone reporting a disaster. Jennifer appeared at Evelyn's elbow. "Legal wants to know if we should prepare a statement. Tell them yes, and tell them to make it honest. We discovered the problem, we reported it, we're cooperating fully." Evelyn rubbed her eyes, and for the first time Adrian saw cracks in her armor. She looked tired. "What's the damage assessment looking like?" "Bad," Jennifer admitted. "We're going to lose the certification until this is resolved. That's at least 3 major contracts on hold, maybe more. Stock's going to drop when this hits the news." "How much?" 20% if we're lucky. 40 if we're not." Evelyn nodded like she'd expected it. "And how many jobs does that translate to?" Jennifer hesitated. "Depends on how long the investigation takes. Could be a dozen, could be 100. Adrian felt his stomach drop. He'd just helped expose a problem that might cost him the only job he could get. "We'll figure it out," Evelyn said, but her voice had lost some of its certainty. "One crisis at a time." David walked over, still holding his camera. "We need to talk about the harness. If this one's wrong, we need to check every engine we've installed in the past year. Maybe longer." "How many is that?" 17, 12 domestic, 5 international." "Jesus." Evelyn looked at the ceiling like it might have answers. "Start making a list. Locations, clients, installation dates. We're going to have to ground every single one until we can verify they're safe." "That's going to cost millions," Robert said from somewhere behind them. "You know what costs more?" Evelyn turned on him. "A plane falling out of the sky because we were too cheap to do this right. So yeah, Robert, it's going to cost millions, and we're going to pay it. Any other observations you'd like to share?" Robert went quiet. Adrian's phone buzzed. He pulled it out, saw a message from Maya's school. "Maya says you were supposed to be here this morning, just checking if everything's okay." He typed back quickly. "Work emergency. Everything's fine. I'll pick her up this afternoon. No problem. She's doing great in class." He pocketed the phone and found Evelyn watching him again. "Your daughter, she said. Yeah. You didn't make drop-off? No, ma'am. She looked like she wanted to say something, but Reeves was walking back over, his face grim. Federal investigators are en route, he announced. FBI and NTSB. They'll be here in 3 hours. In the meantime, I need statements from everyone involved in the discovery, starting with you. He pointed at Evelyn. And then him. He pointed at Adrian. Happy to cooperate, Evelyn said. Reeves set up shop in the hangar's conference room, a glass-walled box that overlooked the main floor. Adrian watched through the windows as Evelyn sat down across from him, her posture rigid, her hands folded on the table. The interview lasted 40 minutes. When she came out, her face was carefully blank. You're up, she told Adrian. He walked into the conference room feeling like he was walking into an execution. Reeves gestured to the chair Evelyn had vacated. It was still warm. Adrian Cole, Reeves said, reading from his notes. Former senior engineer, currently employed as janitorial staff. That's an unusual career trajectory. Life's full of surprises. I'm sure. Reeves clicked his pen. Walk me through how you identified the problem. Adrian did, keeping it factual, avoiding the parts that made him sound bitter. The sound, the thermal expansion theory, the realization about the wrong materials. Reeves took notes in careful longhand, occasionally asking for clarification. And 7 years ago, Reeves said, you filed a safety report about this exact issue. Yes, sir. But it was never acted on. No, sir. Who was your supervisor at the time? Adrian hesitated. Names had power. Saying this one out loud would start a chain reaction he couldn't stop. Richard Voss, he said finally. Reeves wrote it down. Is he still with the company? I don't know. I haven't worked here in 7 years. But you came back as a janitor. I needed a job. This was hiring. And it didn't bother you, being back in the place that pushed you out? Adrian met his eyes. It bothered me every single day. But my daughter needed to eat, so I dealt with it. Something shifted in Reeves' expression. Not sympathy exactly, but understanding maybe. How old is she? 8. That's a good age. He closed his notebook. I've got a granddaughter that age. Thinks she's going to be an astronaut. Maybe she will be. Maybe. Reeves stood up. Thank you for your time, Mr. Cole. And for what it's worth. You did the right thing this morning. Just did what needed doing. That's usually when it matters most. Adrian left the conference room and nearly walked straight into Marcus, who'd been hovering outside. They want me next, Marcus said, his face pale. What did he ask you? The truth. I'd stick with that if I were you. Easy for you to say. You don't have anything to lose. Adrian almost laughed. Yeah, nothing at all. He walked away before Marcus could respond, heading back to where the engine sat gutted and exposed. David was there with 2 other engineers, photographing every component from multiple angles. FBI is going to want a complete documentation trail, David explained when he saw Adrian watching. Every part, every connection, every tool mark. This thing's evidence now. You think they'll figure out who did it? Depends on how sloppy they were. If they were smart, they covered their tracks. If they were greedy, he shrugged, greedy people make mistakes. Scott Hendricks, Adrian said. You know him? Knew him. Worked here maybe 8 years. Pretty good engineer, actually. Never seemed like the type to pull something like this. What's the type look like? David considered that. Desperate, usually. Or entitled. Sometimes both. He adjusted his camera angle. Why'd you really come back here, Adrian? You could have gotten janitorial work anywhere. Needed the health insurance. Company plan here covers pre-existing conditions. No waiting period. Your daughter sick? She was. Heart thing when she was little. She's fine now, but the bills... He stopped. We manage. David nodded slowly. That's the kind of thing that makes you swallow a lot of pride. Every day. They worked in silence for a while, David photographing and Adrian handing him tools when needed. It felt almost normal, like the years hadn't happened, and he was still an engineer doing engineer things. Evelyn appeared around noon with coffee and sandwiches from somewhere off-site. She distributed them without ceremony, just set everything down on a folding table and told people to eat. Adrian took a sandwich he didn't want and a coffee he definitely needed. "How'd your interview go?" Evelyn asked, appearing beside him. "Fine. Yours?" "About what you'd expect. He asked if I knew about your safety report from 7 years ago." Adrian's hand tightened on his coffee cup. And I told him the truth, that I didn't. I bought this company 18 months ago. Everything before that is history I inherited, not history I made. She took a sip of her own coffee. "But I'm going to find out who knew, and when I do, they're going to wish they hadn't. That might include some people still working here. Then they should have made better choices. It's not always that simple." "No," she agreed. "But it's also not that complicated. Someone knew there was a safety issue and chose profit over people. That's not complexity. That's just cowardice." Adrian thought about his old supervisor, Richard Voss. Thought about the conversation they'd had in an office not unlike this one, where Voss had explained very carefully why the safety report was going to disappear and why Adrian's career would disappear with it if he pushed. "You ever have to choose between doing the right thing and keeping your job?" he asked. Evelyn looked at him for a long moment. "Yes," she said finally. "Before this, different company, different crisis, I chose the job. It's one of the things I'm not proud of." "What happened?" "Nothing. That's the problem. I kept quiet, kept my position, and nothing changed. Took me 2 years to realize that silence costs more than speaking up." She set down her coffee. "That's why I'm not staying quiet now. Whatever this costs, we're going to pay it." "Even if it destroys the company?" "Especially then. Because if we can't do this right, we don't deserve to survive." Robert appeared in the doorway, his phone pressed to his ear. "Evelyn, we've got a problem." "Another one?" "Stock dropped 32% in the last hour. Trading's been halted, and CNN just called asking for comment on reports of a major safety violation at Apex Aeronautics." Evelyn closed her eyes briefly. "How'd they find out so fast?" "Someone leaked it. Could be anyone at this point. We've got 20 people in this building who know what's happening." "Or someone who wanted it public," David said quietly. "Someone with a reason to hurt the company." They all looked at each other, the same realization dawning simultaneously. "The person who installed the bad harness," Jennifer said. "They'd know we'd eventually find it. This might have been the plan all along." "Sabotage," Marcus breathed. "Corporate sabotage." Evelyn pulled out her phone. "I'm calling our security chief. We need to lock this down before—" "Ms. Hart." One of the younger engineers was running toward them from the main entrance. "There's a man at the front gate saying he's Scott Hendricks. Security's holding him, but he's demanding to talk to you." Everyone froze. "Bring him in," Evelyn said. "Conference room. And get Reeves. He's going to want to hear this." 10 minutes later, Scott Hendricks sat in the conference room looking like he'd aged a decade in 6 months. He was thin, jumpy, his eyes darting around like he expected someone to attack him at any moment. Evelyn sat across from him. Reeves stood in the corner with his arms folded. Adrian watched from outside through the glass wall, along with half the engineering team. "I didn't do it," Scott said before anyone could speak. "Whatever they told you, I didn't install that harness." "Your digital signature is on the installation report," Evelyn said calmly. "Because someone stole my credentials. I reported it to HR when I left, told them to deactivate my access. They said they would." "Who's they?" "Richard Voss. He was handling my exit paperwork." Adrian felt ice slide down his spine. Evelyn leaned forward. "Richard Voss, former VP of Engineering?" "That's him. He's still with the company, isn't he?" "He is." "Senior advisor position, consulting contract." She looked at Reeves. "You getting this?" Reeves nodded, his face hard. "Why would Voss want to sabotage his own company?" Jennifer asked from the doorway. "Not his company anymore," Scott said. "When you bought Apex, you cleaned house. Voss lost most of his power, got shuffled into a nothing position. Word was, he blamed you for it." "So this is revenge," Evelyn said slowly. "Or profit. You tank the stock price, buy low, wait for the recovery, Classic short sell scheme. Scott rubbed his face. I don't know his endgame. I just know he's been calling me for months, asking about company operations, access codes, installation schedules. I didn't think anything of it until I saw the news this morning. Why didn't you report it? Reeves demanded. Report what? That my old boss was asking questions? I didn't know he was planning anything. Scott looked at Evelyn. But when I heard about the engine failure, I knew. I just knew. And I couldn't sit at home pretending I didn't. Evelyn stood up. Where's Voss now? No idea. He works remote most of the time. She pulled out her phone, called security. I need you to locate Richard Voss immediately. Check his office, call his cell, do whatever you need to do. If you find him, detain him. If you don't... She looked at Reeves. We're going to need law enforcement involved in this. Already on it, Reeves said, his own phone out. Adrian stepped away from the window, his mind racing. Richard Voss, the man who'd destroyed his career 7 years ago, was now destroying the company itself. There was a poetry to it that made him feel sick. David appeared beside him. You knew him, Voss. Yeah. What was he like? Smart. Ambitious. The kind of guy who always had an angle. Adrian watched through the glass as Evelyn continued questioning Scott. He used to say that engineering was just applied economics. If the numbers worked, the ethics didn't matter. Sounds like a real prize. He got results, though. That's why they kept him around. Until they didn't. Yeah, until they didn't. Jennifer's phone rang. She answered, listened, went pale. They found his office, she said to Evelyn. It's been cleaned out. Computer, files, personal effects, all gone. Looks like he hasn't been there in weeks. Check his apartment, Evelyn ordered. Already did. Landlord says he moved out last month, left no forwarding address. Reeves swore under his breath. He's running. Probably has been planning this for a while. What about financial records? Evelyn asked. Bank accounts? Credit cards? FBI can get those, but it takes time, Reeves said. And if he's smart, he's already moved his money somewhere we can't track it. He's smart, Adrian said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. He's very smart and patient. If he's been planning this for months, he's thought through every angle. You sound like you know him pretty well, Reeves observed. Well enough to know that he doesn't leave loose ends. Meaning? Adrian looked at the exposed engine, at the wrong-colored cables that had started all of this. Meaning that harness isn't the only thing he sabotaged. There's no way he goes through all this effort for one engine. He'd want maximum damage. The silence that followed was absolute. David moved first, pulling out his tablet. The other installations. The 17 engines we've delivered in the past year. His fingers flew across the screen. If even half of them have the same problem, then we've got planes in the air right now that could fail, Evelyn finished. Her face had gone white. Get me a list. Every client, every location, every aircraft currently in service. That's going to take time, Marcus said. Then start now. And while you're at it, pull every installation report for the last 18 months. If Voss's signature is on any of them, I want to know. The team scattered, moving with the kind of urgent focus that came from understanding exactly how bad things could get. Reeves was already on his phone again. I need to issue a safety advisory. Ground every aircraft with Apex engines until they can be inspected. He looked at Evelyn. This is going to be national news, probably international. I know. Your company might not survive it. I know that too. He studied her for a moment, then nodded with something like respect. You're handling this better than most would. Ask me again tomorrow. Adrian's phone buzzed. He pulled it out, expecting another message from Maya's school, but it was an unknown number. He almost ignored it. Then something made him open it. You should have stayed quiet. Now everyone pays. No signature, no context. But Adrian knew who it was from. He showed it to Evelyn. She read it, her jaw tightening, then handed the phone to Reeves. That's a threat, Reeves said, and probably admissible. We can trace this. He's using a burner, Adrian said. He's too smart to use his real number. How do you know? Because that's what he told me to do 7 years ago, when I filed the safety report. He said if I wanted to blow the whistle, I should at least be smart enough to cover my tracks. Adrian took his phone back. He taught me how to hide. I just didn't listen. Evelyn was staring at him. He threatened you back then, too. Not directly. He just made it very clear what would happen if I didn't back down. Adrian pocketed his phone. I had a 2-year-old and no savings, so I backed down. And now? Now my daughter's 8, and I've got nothing left to lose. That's not true, Evelyn said quietly. You've got a lot to lose. Your job, your reputation, possibly your safety if Voss is desperate enough. Maybe, but some things are worth the risk. Like what? Adrian thought about Maya, about the way she'd looked at him that morning when he'd told her he might not make drop-off. Disappointed but understanding, because she'd learned young that sometimes her dad couldn't be there. That work came first. That survival required sacrifice. Like making sure she grows up in a world where people actually fix their mistakes, he said. Evelyn held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded. All right then, let's fix this. Over the next 2 hours, the scope of the disaster became clear. Of the 17 engines Apex had delivered in the past year, 9 had installation reports signed by Richard Voss using Scott Hendrick's stolen credentials. 9 engines, 9 aircraft, 9 potential catastrophes waiting to happen. The FBI arrived at 2:15 with enough agents to intimidate a small army. They took over the conference room, set up computers and phones, and started interviewing everyone who'd been in the building that morning. Adrian gave his statement to a woman who introduced herself as Special Agent Marsh. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe 30, with sharp eyes that didn't miss anything. So you filed a safety report in 2019, she said, reviewing her notes. Warning about this exact problem. Yes, ma'am. And Richard Voss suppressed it. Yes, ma'am. Why didn't you take it higher? Go over his head. I tried. Voss's boss at the time was James Porter. I went to him, explained the situation. Porter said he'd look into it. Adrian remembered that conversation, the way Porter had nodded sympathetically while doing absolutely nothing. 2 weeks later, I was called into HR and told my position was being eliminated due to restructuring. They offered me a severance package if I signed a non-disclosure agreement. Did you sign it? No, I just left and came back 3 years later as a janitor. Like I said, I needed the health insurance. Marsh made a note. Voss contacted you after you left, didn't he? Adrian blinked. How did you? Phone records. We pulled them this afternoon. He called you 16 times in the month after your resignation. I never answered. But he left messages. Yeah, offering me money to stay quiet, then threatening me when I wouldn't take it, then just... He stopped. Eventually, he stopped calling, because he thought you were neutralized, that you'd given up. Marsh leaned forward. But you didn't, did you? You kept copies of everything. Adrian felt his pulse quicken. I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do. The safety report, the documentation, the evidence. You kept it all, just in case. She smiled slightly. It's what I would have done. He said nothing. Mr. Cole, Marsh said gently, if you have any documentation that could help this investigation, now would be the time to share it. Adrian thought about the storage unit across town, the one he'd been paying for 7 years, the one that held a banker's box full of papers he'd told himself he'd never need again. I might have something, he admitted. Then I suggest you go get it. He left the building at 3:45, driving through Houston traffic that seemed to know he was in a hurry and deliberately slow down out of spite. The storage facility was in a strip mall between a nail salon and a tax preparation office, the kind of place that existed purely for people who needed to hide things from their present lives. Unit 247. He'd memorized the code years ago, Maya's birthday plus the year he'd met her mother. The door rolled up with a screech that echoed in the empty corridor. Inside was almost nothing, a box of Maya's baby clothes he couldn't bring himself to donate, some old textbooks, and in the corner, wrapped in a trash bag like it might be contagious, the banker's box. He pulled it out, felt the weight of it. 7 years of evidence, 7 years of silence, 7 years of wondering if he'd made the right choice. Now he'd find out. He was driving back when his phone rang. Evelyn. Where are you? She asked without preamble. Getting something for the FBI. Be there in 20 minutes. Make it 10. We've got a situation. What kind of situation? The kind where one of our engines just failed on a commercial flight over Arizona. Adrian's hands tightened on the wheel. Casualties. Plane made an emergency landing. No injuries, but it's all over the news, which means Voss is watching. He'll know we're on to him. Exactly. So whatever you're bringing back, I hope it's good. It's everything. He hung up and pressed the accelerator harder. When he got back to Apex, the parking lot was full of news vans. Reporters swarmed the entrance, shouting questions at anyone who walked by. Adrian slipped in through a side door, the banker's box heavy in his arms. Marsh met him in the hallway. That it? Everything I kept. Reports, emails, photographs, recordings from meetings where Voss talked about cost-cutting measures that violated safety protocols. She took the box, looked inside, and her eyebrows rose. This is enough to bury him, if you can find him. Oh, we'll find him. She smiled, and it was not a nice expression. People like Voss always think they're smarter than everyone else. That's usually when they make their biggest mistake. Adrian followed her back to the conference room where Evelyn and Reeves were watching a news broadcast on someone's laptop. The headline read, "Major aerospace company faces crisis as engine failures mount." They're calling it the biggest aviation safety scandal in a decade, Evelyn said without looking away from the screen. And they're probably right. You okay? Adrian asked. She finally turned to face him, and he saw that she'd been crying. Not much, just enough to leave faint tracks in her makeup that she hadn't bothered to fix. I bought this company because I believed in it, she said. Because I thought aerospace was about pushing boundaries, about making impossible things happen. And instead I find out it's just... She gestured helplessly. This. It doesn't have to be. Doesn't it? How many companies survive something like this? The ones that actually fix it. And if we can't? Adrian set down the box. Then at least we tried. That's more than most people can say. She laughed, bitter and sharp. You're an optimist. After everything that happened to you, you're still an optimist. Not really. I just know that giving up doesn't make things better. No, she agreed. It just makes them quieter. Marsh opened the box and started pulling out files, her expression growing more intent with each page. After a few minutes, she looked up. This is prosecutable, she said. Multiple counts of fraud, reckless endangerment, possibly manslaughter if we can tie him to any incidents. Where did you hide all this? Storage unit. Figured someday it might matter. It matters. She pulled out her phone. I need to conference in the U.S. Attorney's office. This just became a federal case. As she walked away making calls, Adrian felt something settle in his chest. Not peace exactly, but something close to it. Like a weight he'd been carrying for 7 years had finally been set down. Evelyn was watching him. You could have used this years ago. Could have gone to the media, forced an investigation, and lost custody of my daughter when Voss made good on his threats. He had lawyers, money, connections. I had a baby and a studio apartment. Adrian shook his head. I chose her. I'd do it again. Even knowing what happened, what he did? Especially knowing, because she's alive and safe and happy, and that's worth every compromise I had to make. That's love, Evelyn said quietly. No, that's just being a parent. Outside the conference room, the building was emptying out. It was after 5 now, and people were being sent home while the FBI worked. Adrian checked his phone and realized with a jolt that Maya's school had ended 2 hours ago. He called the aftercare program, got the director. Hey, this is Adrian Cole. I know I'm late picking up Maya. Oh, she's fine. She's been helping Mrs. Patterson organize the art supplies. Want to talk to her? Please. A moment later, Maya's voice came on the line, bright and unconcerned. Hi, Daddy. Hey, sweetheart, I'm so sorry I'm late. It's okay. Are you still having a work thing? Yeah, a big one. Is it a bad work thing or a good work thing? He thought about that. I'm not sure yet. Maybe both. That doesn't make sense. I know. I'll explain when I pick you up. Give me 30 minutes, okay? Okay, love you. Love you too, baby. He hung up and found Evelyn still watching him. Go, she said. Get your daughter. We've got this covered. You sure? Adrian, you've been carrying this company on your back